You're watching A News. I'm Leila Massima. Here are the top stories for today. Trump and Zelensky trade verbal jabs as relations between the two leaders hit a new low. Tariffs, deportations and foreign policy transitions. A News presents a report on the first months of Trump's return to the White House. Hamas handed over the bodies of deceased hostages to Israel as a part of the Gaza ceasefire deal. US President Donald Trump is accusing Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky of failing to engage in peace talks with Russia. Trump warns Kyiv that it may lose more if Zelensky does not act quickly to end the war.
Because they're running out of people, they're running out of soldiers.
US President Donald Trump has increased his criticism of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky on Wednesday. Speaking at a Florida conference, he said Zelensky could have joined peace talks with Russia in Saudi Arabia. Ukraine and European nations were not included in the talks in Riyadh on Tuesday, raising concerns that America and Russia might make a deal that ignores Kyiv's security interests. Trump says he hopes for a ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine soon.
I love Ukraine, but Zelensky has done a terrible job. His country is shattered, and millions of people have unnecessarily died. And you can't bring a war to an end if you don't talk to both sides. You got to talk. They haven't been talking for 3 years. So we hope to see a ceasefire soon and to reestablish stability in Europe and the Middle East.
However, Mr. Zelensky accused Donald Trump in living in a disinformation space.
Unfortunately, President Trump, who we respect a lot as a leader of the nation that we really respect, the American nation, who supported us all the time, unfortunately, he lives in this disinformation space. I would like Trump's team to have more truth. All of this definitely doesn't have a positive impact on Ukraine. They are letting Putin out of isolation. And I think Putin and Russia are really happy because they are involved in discussions. And yesterday, there were signals that they are the victims. That's something new.
Zelensky's 5-year term was supposed to end in 2024, but presidential and parliamentary elections cannot be held under martial law since Russia's invasion in February 2022.
French President Emmanuel Macron and British Prime Minister Keir Starmer will visit Washington next week. The talks come as diplomatic efforts continue to end Russia war in Ukraine. US National Security Advisor Mike Waltz confirmed that upcoming meeting, saying that US is engaging with all sides. Speaking to Fox News, he revealed that technical teams will soon begin discussions on the details of a potential peace deal.The US has made a sharp turn in both domestic and foreign policies in just 1 month of Donald Trump's second term in the White House. From mass deportations, tariffs and federal layoffs to climate, Gaza and Ukraine, the Trump administration brought major changes.
I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear.
US President Donald Trump, now in his first month back in office, has made waves with a series of bold and controversial moves, both on the international and domestic fronts. On the international stage, Trump has shaken up foreign relations. In the Middle East, his suggestion to take control of the Gaza Strip has sparked heated debate. The president proposed that the US would take responsibility for dismantling weapons and unexploded bombs, even suggesting Gaza could become the Riviera of the Middle East.
The US will take over the Gaza Strip, and we will do a job with it too. We'll own it and be responsible for dismantling all of the dangerous unexploded bombs and other weapons on the site, level the site and get rid of the destroyed buildings.
Additionally, Trump proposed permanently displacing Palestinians from Gaza, stating that people there had no choice but to leave the area devastated by Israel's military assault. In trade, Trump has reignited the trade war, implementing tariffs of 25% on steel and aluminum imports from Canada, Mexico, and China. After Mexico agreed to reinforce its northern border with 10,000 National Guard members to stem the flow of illegal drugs, Trump paused new tariffs on the country for 1 month. Later, Trump also announced that he would postpone threatened tariffs on Canadian imports for at least 30 days. The tariffs are a part of his larger goal to boost US manufacturing. However, in January, prices rose up 0.5%, with economists attributing some of the increase to the higher production costs triggered by tariffs. Additionally, industrial output has slowed, with manufacturing down 0.1%. and auto production falling by 5.2%. Trump also took an aggressive stance on NATO funding, calling for member nations to significantly increase their defense contributions. He suggested that the US should not continue to shoulder an unfair burden for NATO's military expenses, proposing that NATO allies should pay 5% of their GDP for defense. US President has also focused on Ukraine, pushing for peace talks between Russia and Ukraine. However, US allies have expressed concerns about Ukraine's exclusion from these discussions, fearing it could weaken their position. President Zelensky also stressed that no peace can be reached without Ukraine's direct involvement. In addition, Trump has frozen US aid funding to multiple regions, including Africa, Asia, and Latin America, halting programs administered by USAID. This has impacted humanitarian efforts, counter-narcotics programs, and media funding initiatives, which had been used to shape narratives globally. Turning to domestic issues, Trump's first month has seen a flurry of executive actions and controversial decisions. Perhaps the most shocking, his decision to pardon over 1,500 individuals involved in the January 6, 2021 Capitol riots. He also dismissed several federal agents linked to investigations surrounding the riots, drawing criticism for what some see as an effort to undermine accountability. On the federal level, Trump has launched a major overhaul of the government, firing thousands of employees in key agencies. The White House has justified the firings as part of an effort to streamline and cut down on bureaucratic expansion. But these moves have drawn sharp criticism from opponents, with many accusing Trump of politicizing federal agencies. But the biggest shock came in the realm of his aggressive stance on immigration. President Trump has enacted intensive measures to crack down on illegal immigration, including plans to create a 30,000-bed migrant facility at Guantanamo Bay.
Today, I'm also signing an executive order to instruct the Departments of Defense and Homeland Security to begin preparing the 30,000-person migrant facility at Guantanamo Bay. Most people don't even know about it. We have 30,000 beds in Guantanamo to detain the worst criminal illegal aliens threatening the American people. Some of them are so bad we don't even trust the countries to hold them.
Trump has also rolled back several federal diversity, equity, and inclusion programs across government agencies, citing them as unnecessary and divisive. These programs were initially put in place to promote inclusivity within the federal workforce, but Trump's administration has framed them as counterproductive. In terms of energy policy, President Trump has pursued an aggressive agenda to achieve US energy independence. This has included lifting climate-related restrictions on oil and gas drilling, signaling his administration's support for fossil fuel production. Trump's policy shifts have not gone uncontested. Over 70 lawsuits have been filed against his executive orders, including challenges to the USAID funding freeze, his immigration measures, and the rollback of DEI programs. Critics, including several state governments and advocacy organizations, are challenging these moves in court. Furthermore, some members of Congress, including Republicans, have voiced resistance to Trump's tariffs and the dissolution of federal agencies, signaling that his policies may face additional hurdles moving forward.
The World Trade Organization and 6 countries have found talks in Geneva on Wednesday about recent trade tensions constructive. The main topic of discussion was about the recent tariff hikes by the United States.
China has sharply criticised the recent US tax hikes, describing them as tariff shocks that could destabilise the global trading system. The comments come as US President Donald Trump announced 25% tax hikes on imports of aluminium and steel and autos to the US, which begin next month. The World Trade Organization met with other countries in Geneva on Wednesday to discuss their concerns over Trump's tariff policies. The WTO says the talks were constructive.
Beside China, on this issue was United States, Nicaragua, Malaysia, Namibia, Trinidad and Tobago, and Russia. The members who spoke expressed concern about the current instability in the multilateral trading system, noting the counterproductive nature of these tensions to global trade. They also raised alarm about the weakening of institutions designed to enhance global trade for mutual benefit and to peacefully resolve disputes based on enforceable rights and obligations.
The US dismissed China's criticism, referring to the country's economic system as a predatory, non-market economic system. Trade tensions between Washington and Beijing at the WTO existed before Trump took office. However, less than a month after returning to the White House, Trump imposed 10% tariffs on all Chinese imports, prompting China to retaliate with new levies on key US exports.
Greek Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis warns European leaders to wake up from geopolitical complacency. He made the comments after France hosted a meeting with some European leaders about the war in Ukraine. However, Greece was not invited to participate in the talks. Mitsotakis calls for urgent action to strengthen Europe's defense and reduce dependence on the US. He welcomes the European Union's move toward greater defense spending flexibility.
I've spoken many times about the need for Europe to wake up from the geopolitical and economic lethargy into which it has unfortunately fallen. Recent developments and this different view from the United States now oblige us to face the truth and move at a very high speed to implement long-discussed decisions. This includes establishing a defense policy that allows Europe to project deterrent power on its own without complete dependence on the United States.
Europe's biggest defense company, BAE Systems, has announced plans to expand its operations in response to the rising demand for defense equipment and services.
BAE Systems stated it could scale up operations to meet rising demand in Europe, but this would require governments to offer long-term guarantees of increased military spending. Shares in Europe's defence companies have rallied over the last week. It followed a summit in Munich where the US told Europe's political leaders they must raise military budgets. BAE Chief Executive Officer Charles Woodburn highlighted that shifts in European security could significantly boost defence spending, with high-level talks already underway with governments. Analysts estimate correcting NATO's 10 years of underspending to meet the 2% target would cost $834 billion. BAE reported $42.5 billion in orders last year, bringing its backlog to a record $98 billion, 3 times its annual sales. On Wednesday, Rheinmetall announced a $271 million deal with Germany's armed forces for logistical support during troop redeployments, further emphasizing Europe's focus on defense.
Hamas has handed over the bodies of 4 Israeli hostages to the International Committee of the Red Cross in Gaza's Khan Yunis. The transfer happened under the last month's ceasefire agreement. A masked Hamas fighter stood on stage as an ICRC representative signed documents confirming the handover. Among the victims were the youngest hostages, a baby and his 4-year-old brother, taken during the October 7th, 2023 attack in Israel. The ceasefire brokered by Qatar and Egypt, with US support, paved the way for the exchange. Ugandan troops have entered the eastern Congolese city of Bunia to help Congolese forces at Kinshas's request. The Ugandan army says they deployed to assist in stopping violence by armed groups. Isabel Nakiria reports from Kampala.
The arrival of Ugandan troops in Bunia follows rising insecurity in Ituri province. Several militia groups have destabilized the eastern DRC, causing thousands of people to flee. The joint operation of the Ugandan army and the Congolese forces is aimed at restoring stability and ending insurgency in the wake of M23 capture of major towns in eastern DRC. Bunia is an important economic hub in Ituri province, and the joint military operation to secure urban centers is intended to boost security in eastern DRC. The deployment comes as Congolese forces are facing a challenge pushing the rebels back as rebels take over major towns after Bukavu and Goma. It's expected that security operations will intensify with Ugandan troops stationed in Bunia. Over 100 armed groups are fighting to control the mineral-rich nation, but the M23 have recently shown ability to make rapid gains. Kinshasa is demanding the Rwandan-backed M23 to withdraw their forces, but Rwanda has continually denied any involvement. Isabel Nakiria for A News in Kampala.
The UN Security Council is holding an emergency meeting to address the escalating conflict in the Democratic Republic of Congo. It comes as M23 rebels continue their offensive amid worsening humanitarian concerns. There are fears that increasing violence will spill through the region.
Civilians in the Democratic Republic of Congo are at breaking point. That's according to the United Nations. 7 million people within the country are displaced and more than 1 million have sought asylum beyond the country's borders, according to the UN. Now the UN Security Council is holding an emergency meeting to address the escalating conflict. The UN is urging all warring parties to allow life-saving relief to reach the most vulnerable, and there are fears the violence could further destabilize the region.
The M23's offensive in North Kivu and South Kivu has increased the vulnerability of girls and women to conflict-related sexual violence, mass displacement, the influx of combatants and prisoners, and the proliferation of weapons have considerably exacerbated the risk. At the same time, logistical and security constraints continue to hamper the United Nations' ability to verify reported cases.
The Democratic Republic of Congo's Foreign Minister Teresa Kaikwamba-Wagner says that remaining passive while civilians suffer is unacceptable.
The time for theoretical debates is over. It is now time to uphold the very principles that define this institution: peace, security, and respect for international law. International law that is universal and applies to all, even while seeking African solutions. Standing by silently while civilians are killed is not a solution, and certainly not an African one.
M23 rebels are reportedly backed by Rwanda. Has Rwanda's UN ambassador denies this accusation.
Rwanda cannot take the blame for the problems that DRC has faced endemically. As President Kagame stated in Addis Ababa, and I quote, "We have our own problems to deal with. Congo is too big for Rwanda to carry on its back," end of quote.
M23 rebels are advancing towards Uvira after capturing Bukavu earlier this month. In January, the group took Goma. This escalation of violence is the gravest in more than a decade of the long-running conflict in eastern Congo. It's rooted in the spillover of Rwanda's 1994 genocide into the country and in the struggle for control of Congo's vast mineral resources.
Cuba has announced that high-octane fuel will not only be available for dollars, adding to the economic strain on residents. The move is part of a growing shift toward dollarization, with concerns rising over fuel access for those earning in pesos.
Gas stations in Havana are packed, but for many, the wait may no longer be enough. The government has announced that high-octane fuel will now only be available for dollars, marking another step toward dollarization. Authorities cite U.S. sanctions for fuel shortages, forcing states' vehicles to switch to regular gasoline. But for private car owners, the shift creates new problems.
For people like doctors or professionals who own modern cars that require this special gasoline but do not earn salaries in dollars, I wonder, how will they use their cars? Modern cars continue to enter the country, and I ask myself, how? We imported one for our company, Nostalgia Car, which is a passenger transportation SME, and it depends on that fuel. If you have no way to buy dollars, you have to leave the car at home. If there are no mechanisms to acquire dollars, we have to stop using the car.
Traffic continues, but concerns are growing.
No, that's not right. That's very bad. Very bad. A car that runs on special gasoline will have its engine ruined if filled with regular gasoline. So that's not right. I don't know to what extent, but it's not right.
For years, the Caribbean island has operated dollar-based stores, but this is the first time a basic necessity is restricted. With shortage worsening, fuel access now depends on hard currency, deepening economic struggles. Cuba blames the Cold War-era U.S. trade embargo and the COVID-19 pandemic for crippling tourism and domestic industry, wiping out the cash it needs to import essential goods. But top officials have also acknowledged that internal bureaucracy and inefficiencies in its state-run model contribute to the crisis.
In technology news, Microsoft claims to have created a groundbreaking new chip, saying it demonstrates that quantum computing is years, not decades away. This announcement aligns with predictions from Google and IBM, suggesting that a transformative shift in computing technology is approaching sooner than previously anticipated.
Microsoft claims its new Majorana 1 chip brings quantum computing closer to reality. Quantum computers promise to solve problems that would take today's systems millions of years, but their core component, the qubit, is notoriously error-prone. Microsoft says its chip is more stable than competitors. The chip has been in the works for nearly 2 decades and has a new type of material.
It's called a topological superconductor, or topoconductor for short, and this is something that people have hypothesized for decades. But no one had really reliably created this in the laboratory or been able to harness it for quantum information processing.
Google last year showed off its own new quantum chip, saying that commercial applications are only 5 years away. IBM said large-scale quantum computers will be online by 2033. Microsoft did not give a timeline for when its chip would be scaled up to quantum computers that can outpace today's machines. But in a blog post, the company said it would be years, not decades.
Once a symbol of American maritime engineering, the SS United States is beginning its final journey. After years docked in Philadelphia, the historic ocean liner is heading to Alabama for preparations before being turned into the world's largest artificial reef. The ship, known for setting speed records and carrying famous passengers, is now ready for a new role beneath the ocean.
The retired historic ocean liner SS United States has begun a new journey after decades of uncertainty. On Wednesday, the ship was towed along the Delaware River, heading towards Alabama. The ship will take 18 days, travelling at a speed of 5 nautical miles per hour along the east coast and around Florida.
The SS United States. She was 5 city blocks long.
Launched on June the 23rd, 1951 for United States Lines, the vessel was a marvel of its time. This ship stretched the length of 5 city blocks and weighed 53,000 tons. During its operational years, it served as a luxury passenger liner, crossing the Atlantic Ocean and carrying nearly 1 million passengers before retiring in 1969. The The ship will now be cleaned to remove hazardous materials before being sunk off the coast of Florida to become an artificial reef. The $10 million project will take over a year to complete. To ensure environmental safety, modern American recycling services will remove non-metal materials, fuel and potentially hazardous substances, such as asbestos. The ship's funnels and radar mast will be preserved and donated to the SS United States Conservancy, which plans to create a museum dedicated to the ship's legacy. The sinking process is highly complex, and experts estimate it could take several hours. Officials in Florida hope this artificial reef will provide a new habitat for marine life and become a unique diving attraction, generating millions in tourism revenue. Located about 20 miles offshore, it'll be added to the country's network of more than 500 artificial reefs.
You are watching A News, bringing you the latest. Stay tuned for more updates.